Welcome to Learning Podcasts, RTS Game Design, when more workers stop helping.
A new worker pops out. The player sends them to a crowded woodline. They walk around two other workers, reach the tree late, gather for a moment, then walk back through the same traffic.
Technically the worker count went up, but the economy barely changed.
The player did the thing RTS games train you to do. Keep making workers. Keep the economy moving.
And that is the villager problem. One more worker is only useful if the loop has room for them.
The first mistake is thinking of a worker as a tiny resource faucet. It is not. A worker is a loop through space. Leave the base, reach the resource, gather, carry, return, deposit, repeat.
So the value is not the unit existing. The value is how much useful work fits inside that loop.
Exactly. If the loop is short and clean, the worker spends most of its life gathering.
If the loop is long or blocked, the same worker spends more of its life moving, waiting, or correcting pathing.
The unit still looks busy. That is the trap. Activity and throughput are not the same thing.
This is why the early economy feels so clean. The first few workers have open space, the resource is close, the path is simple, there's no traffic jam yet.
Right. Early workers are almost pure upside. They start gathering quickly, they return quickly, and the player can feel the economy accelerating.
That feeling is important design. The game teaches the habit. Make workers, put them on resources, watch the base come alive.
It would be strange if the first worker lesson were complicated. The player needs the economy to feel learnable.
Right. The danger is that the same habit eventually stops being the whole answer.
Saturation starts when the resource patch cannot give every worker clean work at the same time.
The patch is not infinite just because the resource number is large?
Exactly. One worker has the good angle, another takes the nearby angle, the next one stands behind them, walks around them, or waits for a spot to open.
The resource has shape. A forest, a mine, a mineral line, a fuel point. Whatever the fiction is, the geometry still matters.
The first workers use the easy surface area. Later workers start competing for the same physical opportunity.
The weird part is that a worker can still look productive while being inefficient. They are moving. They are not idle. The player sees activity.
But walking is dead time for income. A worker walking to a far patch is not gathering. A worker returning through a long route is not gathering. The loop still completes, but less of the loop is resource work.
Oh, interesting. So two players can have the same worker count and very different economies.
Yes, one has short loops and clean deposits. The other has long routes, awkward turns, and workers spending half their lives in transit.
The UI may count both as workers. The economy does not.
Drop-off placement is one of the cleanest ways RTS games make that visible. Put the deposit point close, and the loop tightens. Put it far away, and the worker count becomes misleading.
The same resource patch can be good or bad depending on where the player is allowed to deposit. That is a very RTS kind of problem. The resource is visible, but the efficient route to use it has to be built.
Right. This is not production capacity. This is more physical. Steps, turns, traffic near the deposit, and whether the building smooths the route or gets in the way.
I love that. It is economy as layout.
Exactly. A good RTS economy is partly a spatial puzzle, and the drop-off point is one of the puzzle pieces the player can actually move.
Practical aside, congestion is where the economy starts feeling less like arithmetic and more like actual little people getting in each other's way.
That is a good way to put it. Workers collide, detour, fan out, bunch up, and sometimes choose paths that are technically legal but painfully inefficient.
Which means the designer is tuning more than gather rates.
Yes. Unit radius, collision, resource shape, deposit footprint, turn speed, selection behavior, and command responsiveness all change how crowded the economy feels.
A worker economy is a physical simulation wearing a spreadsheet costume, which is a nightmare if the player cannot see why it is happening.
Then the map scales the same idea up. Safe resources near the starting base create early confidence. Far resources create travel time. Exposed resources create risk.
The map is not just hosting the economy, it is writing the economy.
Exactly. Dense clusters invite saturation. Spread out patches force distribution. Scarce nearby resources push the player outward.
If every resource were equally close, equally safe, and equally dense, the worker question would flatten. Make more until the obvious limit. The moment the next resource is farther away or split across awkward terrain, the economy becomes a map decision.
Real RTS maps usually make the next source of income meaningfully different from the first one. The next worker may need a new place to work.
That creates the real decision. If the old patch is crowded, what should the player do with the next worker?
There are several answers, and each one says something different about the game. Add the worker anyway and accept weaker returns, build a closer drop-off, move workers to a different resource.
Or take an expansion. Or stop adding workers for a while and spend attention somewhere else.
Right. The marginal worker is a question, not a commandment.
Where will this worker gather? How long before they pay back the time and cost? What layout problem do they create? What alternative did the player delay by making them? That is the marginal worker test.
There is another constraint that makes this interesting. Attention. Perfect worker efficiency is possible only if the player keeps looking.
That sounds rewarding until the army is also trying not to die.
Exactly. Reassign this worker, fix that route, build the drop-off one tile better, pull a worker away before they jam the line.
Here's where it gets interesting. RTS designers have to decide how much economy micro is fun before it becomes busy work.
Too little and the economy becomes automatic. Too much, and the player spends the whole match babysitting workers instead of making strategy decisions.
Good saturation should be readable. The player should see the crowded patch, the long walk, the idle worker, the awkward route, the deposit point that is just a little too far away.
Right. The best version is not hidden math. The player feels the curve. Early workers feel powerful. Later workers feel situational. The map starts asking for a new decision.
And the feedback has to arrive while the player can still respond.
Yes. If the game only reveals the problem through a post-game graph, that is useful for analysis, but weaker as design.
During the match, the player needs visible cues that the next worker is no longer clean value. Crowding should look crowded. Long walks should look long. A bad drop-off should feel awkward before a guide tells you it was inefficient.
That is the design goal. Not to punish worker production, not to make economy obscure. The goal is to make growth become a choice. Add another worker, improve the loop, take a new resource, shift the mix, or stop growing for a moment.
And this is where the connection to the bigger economy lesson is small but important. A sloppy worker economy makes every later conversion problem worse.
Right. If the worker loops are inefficient, the stockpile arrives late. If the resource layout is awkward, the expansion is fragile.
If attention is trapped in economy cleanup, something else is being neglected. The player may still be playing well, but the game is asking whether those extra seconds of worker control are worth the army movement, scouting, or tech choice they are not watching.
But the center here is the worker curve itself. More workers can be good. The design question is when the next one stops being good enough.
A worker is a loop through space. That loop can be clean, crowded, long, exposed, or attention-hungry. Once you see that, worker count stops looking like a scoreboard and starts looking like a design curve.
Next, we move from economy to army design, why no unit can be allowed to win every matchup.
The economy asks, where does the next worker actually help? The army asks a different question. What should beat what? And why?
That question is where counter design starts.
Thanks for listening to Learning Podcasts.